one of those things that Zoom hasn't managed to be able to do is to enable us to reach out through the camera and actually taste the food. Unfortunately, we haven't even got smellathon, so we're just going to have to imagine those smells coming from those kitchens. So all of you should have received the recipes. So you should have the recipes in front of you. Is there anybody who hasn't got it in front of them? And if you haven't, what we can do is share them on the screen as we go. Is that all right, Hannah? You can do that with us?
I can, but then we won't be able to see our cooks. So I wouldn't do that. If you want to download them, they're on the A-Lith online section of the website. So if you go to alith.org.uk /A-Lith online and scroll down to the how-to, you'll find it there.
Lovely, thank you. So we've got an hour, or just under an hour now, so we're going to go straight to Gloria first, who is going to talk a little bit about and show us how to cook her chicken and wet chips.
Okay, so everybody can hear me? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Lynette and Hannah, for organising this, because this is so lovely. It makes you feel part of the community. So thank you very much. And thank you for asking me. I think I've probably been asked because I share coffee and cakes with Lynette occasionally and talk endlessly about food. And Hannah has been to my sister's cooking demonstration, because my sister, I'm one of three girls. I'm the middle one, and I come from quite a religious Uzbek Israeli family. So Uzbek, as in Uzbekistan. My father was born in Samarkand in Bukhara in the early 1900s, and my mother was born in Palestine. My parents were actually second cousins. And I come from a very, very large family. I've got over 40 first cousins and probably 1,000 cousins all over the world. And it's relevant because everything that we cook is big and it's always a feast. So you don't cook 2 or 3 things, you cook 200 or 300 things. My mother died 4 or 5 years ago. She was probably the very best of cooks. I mean, I know we all say that about our mothers, our parents, even sometimes our fathers, but my sisters and I can honestly say that my mother, everything that she cooked was just amazing. So in her memory, my younger sister, put together a cookbook, Miriam's Table. And so what I've done is I've taken a recipe from the cookbook, but I've taken the most simple recipe because my mother would spend weeks preparing for Yom Tov. And she would, even though all of us were married with children, had our own homes, she would not let us cook, and she would not let us host the meals while my father was alive. So while my father was alive and we lived in this big house in Finchley, she would cook for at least 20, 25 people per sitting for Erev Rosh Hashanah, for Rosh Hashanah day, for, to start the fast, to break the fast. And they were all big feasts, all homemade, everything was homemade. When my father died, we then took over the cooking. She was tired, she'd had enough. And so my job was to cook the meal that broke the fast. And I had to do it in exactly the same way that she did it. So it was a feast. And the main dish, so we'd start with deli stuff, but all had to be homemade, fish, salads, pastries, cakes, and everything had to be homemade. So I still do, but I won't this year, sadly. But I would spend days preparing in the way that she did. But the main meal that I'm going to show you now, which is the easiest, she would cook when we got back from shul after the fast, whereas I cook it during the day. So I leave shul about 1 o'clock, rush home, cook, not try anything. I'm really careful that I don't break the fast. Karma, and so I'm cooking and not tasting anything, but because I've done it so often, I feel confident. So what I tend to do, and I'll go on to cooking because we haven't got much time. So It's very simple. It's just chicken, potatoes, tomatoes. That's it. But it is actually the most amazing, tasteful, yummy meal you could have. It was often cooked in a pot about this size, an enormous pot, enormous. But I've cooked it in a smaller pot. So I've cooked it in a Le Creuset, smaller pot, for the purposes of this evening. So there's only going to be 4 of us eating. Normally there's probably about 25 of us here, breaking the fast. So we, invite friends, family, people who've got nowhere to go, in the same way that my parents did. I'd come home on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, and there'd be strangers sitting there because my father would pick people up from synagogue who didn't have anywhere to go. And my sisters and I have carried on that tradition. So we're never quite sure how many people are going to be here. So we always cook a lot more than is required. So what we do is we just get some tomatoes, fresh tomatoes, not tin tomatoes, and we put them in boiling water, skin them, and then chop them up. I've taken some photographs, but I'm sure you all know what chopped tomatoes look like. And then we put them in a dish, okay? But before the tomatoes go in a dish, we brown chicken, just chicken pieces. And I found that kosher chicken is much more preferable to non-kosher chicken. You'll be pleased to know, Lynette. So we brown the chicken pieces, and then we add the tomatoes, and that's it. Just tomatoes, tomato puree, and chicken, and then we cook it. And it should, if you can see, look like that. Can you see it? So it's just sort of chicken in tomatoes, in a dish, looking like that. Okay, so that's what I prepare beforehand, and I prepare that the night before Yom Kippur, so that just sits there. And then in the afternoon, I come home, having organised for my children to peel hundreds of potatoes and make proper chips. So we don't buy frozen. I mean, God forbid, my mother should kill me. Everything has to be homemade. You have to slave over things. So we would peel loads and loads of potatoes, cut them into chips, and in the afternoon of Yom Kippur, and I'm sorry, Hannah, but I'd put the fire on and I would fry chips. And I would have like about 3 of these going, frying, because I don't have a deep fat fryer, because the only time I fry is on Yom Kippur. I don't fry normally. And I never make chips, as much as I love them. But on Yom Kippur, 3 big frying pans come out and I fry chips. And they look like this, okay? So these are just chips. What we do, to answer your question, Lynette, we add the chips to the chicken. Just put it on top, like this. So they go in on top like this, just they're covering the chicken. We just cover the pot and they steam for 10-15 minutes. I keep some chips aside because the children like, ordinary fried chips. But this is probably my children's favourite dish. So I'm going to let that steam, and then it's obligatory that you serve it in a Baharian serving platter. You can't serve it in anything but an Uzbek serving platter. So it gets served in that. There are probably about 3 or 4 of these platters go on the table. By the time this dish gets onto the table, everybody's stuffed with all the cakes and pastries and everything they've eaten beforehand. But somehow everybody manages to eat it. So while it's cooking, unless anybody's got any questions, I can hand over to Nolene or whoever's after me, and then I can show you what it looks like in about 10 minutes or so. The recipe, Lynette, and honestly, it's so easy, and it's an easy dish. It's not an easy dish to do on Yom Kippur, particularly if you're very religious and you won't fry. Or it's not an easy dish to do on Yom Kippur if you do it after the fast has come out, because you have to stand there watching chips fry like my mother used to do. But it's an amazingly easy dish to do during the year, and it
Gloria,
tastes amazing. Yeah.
Gloria, could you prepare this the day before separately, all the item bits separately, and then put it all and assemble it together on the day in the evening?
You could, because obviously there are leftovers, and the next day it tastes as nice.
Right.
But there's something lovely about having it really fresh. And I think my daughter's come back. She's listening to us on the car. That's why. No, you can do. Of course you can. But it's just my grandmother did it. My great grandmother did it. You know, all the recipes that we have over Yom Tov and Friday nights are recipes that have been passed down, and they're often one pot dishes, because when they were living in the shtetls of Jerusalem and Samarkand, and earlier in Afghanistan when they lived in Kabul, they would cook over open fires, and so everything was put into one pot. So most of the cooking is done in a one pot dish.
Lovely. Thank you. I'm sorry that you can't have 25 people to your table this year. Otherwise, I'd probably just walk over and suddenly arrive at your table.
You're going to say that to Nolene, and you're going to say that to Mickey.
I may not, Gloria. I may not. I may just come for your chicken and chips. All right, I might.
I chose that one because it's the easiest of all the recipes, just to show you.
Yeah. No, absolutely lovely. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? If you just sort of raise your hand and I can come to you for Gloria at this moment in time. But if not, then perhaps we will go to Nolene next for her kichels, and then come back to you, Gloria, later to see the finished product as you suggest.
Okay, can I just to prove that my daughter has come back?
The taste test.
Save me a piece. Save me a piece. Thank you, Gloria. Nolene, hi.
Hello, everybody. So I just want to say tonight, my mother-in-law is on our call tonight, and I shouldn't feel under pressure to have my mother-in-law as I'm making kichel, which is a very South African thing, mostly because when I married John, not only did I have my mother-in-law's food that I needed to make, I also had her mother and her mother-in-law's food that I needed to make. So if we're thinking about, passing it on from the generations, I certainly had a load to pass on. I unfortunately didn't know my own grandparents very well. My parents died when they were quite young. But my mother was she was a good cook, but she kept me out of the kitchen. And she never encouraged, and I actually love the kitchen. And she didn't really encourage me in the kitchen. And I wasn't sure if it was because she thought it was good for my career. But I think the reality is she was a clean freak. And the thought that I might eat from the dishes. And so COVID, rest her soul, COVID wouldn't have been good for my mother. So keeping me out of the kitchen was a good idea. Anyway, there is Murphy's Law and karma, and I do love the kitchen. So what I decided to do tonight as well was go for a simple dish or something simple called kichel. But it's not really my favorite Yom Tov thing that we make. What we do make is also a family tradition, something called we call it a babka, but it's like a tea ring. I'll show you a picture. But unfortunately, it's far too complicated to do on the, can you all see that?
Oh yes, you've made one of those. Absolutely fantastic.
And we break our fast on that, and I've passed it on to my children, and Gideon luckily is coming home to make us one from Berlin, so he'll really have an opportunity to do that. But I looked at the kichel and thought it's a much simpler thing to do. So kichel is really a sweet biscuit. I'll show you one I made earlier. It's a sweet biscuit that every South African simcha has kichel at, because we eat it with herring, chopped liver. There's always, and Hannah's nodding because her husband's got, his parents are South African, and it's lovely to snack on as well. But at every simcha there's kichel. Part of the challenge, the kichel challenge, is they've got to be really thin. And South African kichel is particularly, it's a mixture, it's its own little beast. So American kichel is like a bow tie. You would have seen in America, the kichel they have is bow tie, and it's made with egg. And in Europe, they have eier kichel as well, but it's not sweet. South African kichel is sweet. It has sugar sprinkled on top of it. So it's an easy thing to make. And if you don't make it in London, there are hundreds of South Africans who do make it, so you can buy it. But very rarely do we have a yontif or any occasion without kichel. What's been interesting for us is we serve it with the herring and the chopped liver, and our British friends don't eat it. And most people sort of eat it as a snack, but it seems to be that one particular thing. And I joined a Facebook group called Friday Night, which is full of South Africans all over the world. And as it's Yontif, everybody's making their stuff. And in the last 2 weeks, the thing there's been most pictures of is kichel. So it's just that one particular thing. Two just sort of references. This is the cookbook that every South African Jewish girl grows up on. It's called Myrna Rosen. It's probably like Evelyn Rose or the equivalent. And on that particular Facebook group, her daughter came on and said she's still alive and she's still cooking, and it was very lovely. And then this recipe, which you can see is handwritten, is actually my mother-in-law's mother's recipe. And in typical Jewish recipe fashion, it tells you to use eggs. As per that recipe I sent out, eggs, oil, sugar. John's family put a tablespoon of brandy into their kichel, which is unusual. But the best part about the recipe says, enough flour to make firm dough. Yeah, how many recipes have we all been handed down that says a taste of this, enough to do that? So this recipe says enough flour to make firm dough. So you'll see in the recipe I shared, I put about 500 grams of flour, but I would say if you make them, add the flour slowly, because actually I made the first batch this morning and I was in a hurry and I threw all the flour in and it wasn't great. The next batch I made, it was a bit stickier, and the flour, I added the flour slowly. So you'll work out for yourselves what's good in terms of how much flour to add. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tip it down and show you where I am. So the recipe that I've given you makes quite a big piece of dough. I would cut it in half. You can do it in smaller bits depending on how much space you've got and how happy you are rolling out. But it needs to be thin. You can see I can actually see my counter through it. So it needs to be quite thin. So once you've rolled it out, you just paint it with oil because you need to have the sugar sticking to it. So I'll quickly just paint it with oil and then sprinkle it with sugar. There's my oil, and I'll sprinkle some sugar on. So when we do the family bulka that we make, it's actually not dissimilar, except it's bread dough, and we sprinkle it with cinnamon and sugar. So our counter is very used to the sugar being spread on it. And then if you just spread it around, and I normally just roll the rolling pin over it so the sugar sticks onto the kichel. And what you need to do is, if you can all see me cutting, is cut it into diamond shapes. So you need to cut it on the cross rather than into squares, which I'll just quickly do that way. You can see my dough is sticking to my counter, so it might not come up as easily as I'd hoped. But if you do the cut across the middle first, it's a lot easier. And actually, they should be homemade. So if they're not perfect diamonds, it's okay. And then I'll show you how to lay them out. Hang on a sec. I'll just cut the little diamond shapes. There you go. And then, in the recipe I sent out, I said use line and oven tray, but actually what you really want, and I'll show you in a minute, is just use your normal oven trays, the ones, not the flat ones, the ones with the little rims on them, because actually, I don't know if you can see here, can you see it's kind of like wavy, and that's what kichel should look like. But when you lay it out, if you can all see me laying it out, try not to let it go over the edge. Let them go over the edge, because if you let them go over the edge, they curl over like that. Depends how much of a perfectionist you really want to be. but you just lay them out like that, which you can see me doing. I won't do them all. Normally, this amount of dough is 2 oven trays worth. So pop them in the oven, 6 or 7 minutes. So I said it in the recipe, don't walk away from the oven. I'm sure we've all browned nuts and browned noodles. You walk away from the oven, they're burnt. Our house likes the dark ones. So the preference is for dark kikkel. They can be lighter or darker, but that's really what it should look like as you put it into the oven. And then here's one I made before, because that's what we did. They come out on about 200. So you need it on quite a hot, fast oven. And that's what they'll look like. But as you can see, some of mine have bent over because they fell over the edge. So sort of darker. Some people like them light. It just depends what your preference is. John will eat all the dark ones on the far side there. And that is literally...
enjoy, John, enjoy. Have one for us.
There you go. That's a plate of kikkel. So it's really simple. If you're not slaving over herrings and chopped liver, and these days it's hard to make kosher chopped liver because they don't sell raw livers anymore in London. But that's what you eat it with in any South African home at any Yom Tov.
Nolene, thank you. Not as I'm sure that there would be any left over, but if there were, how would you store them?
They keep beautifully. You could actually, most people make them a week or 2 before. They keep beautifully in a Tupperware. So they last, they stay fresh, and you can have them with a cup of tea afterwards. So they last, they're amazing. They last a long time.
Excellent, thank you. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm getting hungrier and hungrier by the moment. Having not eaten dinner yet myself, I'm just sort of like, delicious. Thank you, Nolene. Mickey, where's Mickey gone? There you are. Hello, Mickey.
Hello.
We're going to hear from Mickey about her chicken and apple stuffing.
Well, this is not a recipe, family recipe or anything of the sort, because my mother didn't go for complicated things. She made simpler things, but she also taught me the most important thing, that when you cook with love, and then the food will taste good. It doesn't matter what you do. Good ingredients, that's the main thing. So buy the best chicken you can afford to buy, the best quality. And I clean it. I don't like too much fat. So I cleaned it, but I left enough skin at the end so that I can sew it together. You've got the recipe there. So here are the herbs that I said, the marjoram, thyme, and sage, and they go into the chicken, into the apple mixture. And I use cooking apples, eating apples, normal eating apples, sweet apples, apples you got lying in the fridge, it doesn't matter. And then this is the mixture of salt, pepper, and garlic. I prefer to put it in a container. I find it easier to stuff the chicken that way. So first, I'll rub inside and outside with this mixture of garlic, salt. I will say, depending on the size of the chicken, you need to use about a teaspoon of salt per pound, something like that. Or perhaps less on a chicken. So you put the mixture well, rub it in all over the chicken, the salt, the pepper, and the garlic. And then start stuffing with the apple. I cut my apple on a chipper on the food processor. You know, the thing that makes chips, I make very thin, the apple. So it's small pieces, but it's not mushed up when you finish. And you just go stuffing it and pushing it in. Don't be afraid to shove it in. This recipe comes from a book a friend gave me some 40-something years ago, and it was a proof It was not the book as it came out. She worked in publishing, and she gave me something that was a proof. And the book was called something like Honey and Herbs. And this is what this came from. The stuffing is my own addition to it. Because once you know a recipe, you can start messing about with it, as we all know. You can decide what you like and you don't like. Now I use a bent needle. These are circular needles you buy. They're called curved needles. I think they're for upholstery, but you can use a normal needle as well. It doesn't matter. A big needle. You can even use one that you use for wool. And you start sewing it like you would sew anything. The sides together. You can see here. I'm trying to get. I can't see. Put in here. Having a bowl or a container to hold the chicken up is very important because it makes your life easier. Otherwise, you're fiddling about with it. And this chicken, if you have a chicken brick or a Roma top chicken brick, you know, that Conran brought it to England. I've had a chicken brick. It was an engagement present a long time ago. And I think this is my second chicken brick. When the first one broke, I went out and got another one. Because it is a useful object.
Looks like it. Looks like it.
You know these you put them, you have to put them in cold water for 10 minutes before you use them. And the beauty of them is that you could go to shul. I used to do it every Friday evening. Put some chicken with some sort of chicken with some sort of special spices, depending on which kid's turn it was that week. Whether it was honey or spicy or whatever, whoever won the franchise that week. And you'll put it in the oven, in the cold oven, go to shul, come back. It can sit in the oven for 3 hours or longer. It's brilliant. It's brilliant for that sort of cooking. And you don't need to worry because it just cooks by itself and the sauce stays perfect. Right, so it's cooked. Once it's cooked like this, you put more. I'm not gonna do that now because I'm freezing this one to be ready for the weekend.
So you can freeze it ready stuffed.
Yeah, and you can put, so you put then another teaspoon of margarine all over, and you can use, and the lemon juice, of course. The lemon juice is very important because it counteracts the sweetness of the honey. And then you can use either honey, the proper honey, or this here, for those who know it, Ceylon, that's date honey. And they both work beautifully. And if you don't have a Roma top, you can use a chicken bag or those roasting bags. You know the roasting bags, the ones you buy? What I had. No, I haven't got any. You can use roasting bags as well. But this is all. And you roast it and then enjoy it.
Lovely. And you don't put any oil over the chicken?
No, not because I use this. By using the Roma top, you don't have to put any fat. You don't have to worry about basting it. You don't have to worry about anything. You put it in, go and do whatever you need to do. Go and have a shower.
Fantastic. We got a question from Roz Black. Hello. You need to unmute. Roz, you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Lovely.
When you put it in the oven, does it have a covering over the dish? Because I don't have such.
Yes. This is all. Look.
So it's enclosed.
Yes,
it is. Is that completely enclosed?
Chicken brick. It's another form of chicken brick.
Yeah, but you it needs to be completely covered, in other words.
Yes, or you roast it like you normally roast a chicken, you know.
Yeah. Well, I would leave it open if I was, but I don't do all.
Yeah, you can do that. You can also, instead of adding water when you are roasting it, add some orange juice.
Uh-huh.
That tastes very, gives it also a nice flavor.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you.
Sounds fascinating.
Any other questions for Mickey? I should have, and I'm sorry, I should have asked about Nolene. We'll come to know if anyone's got any questions for Nolene or for Mickey. Has anyone got any?
Yeah, can I ask Nolene? Nolene, how long can they stay in a container, do you think?
Probably 2 weeks.
Oh, really? So quite some time.
Yeah.
And they're sweet.
They're sweet. They're sweet. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
they're eaten with a savory dish, but they're sweet. So they kind of, it's yin and yang, the umami.
Yeah. And they look lovely.
Well, they're
lovely. Yeah.
There's a woman who's making them for panzers. So if you go into Panzer, those are homemade ones. She's selling them.
Oh, right.
How much does she
but they look very easy to cook as well.
But they're really easy to make. You shouldn't be buying them. They're just really easy.
Mickey, what would you serve that chicken with?
With, well, depends what you like. Potatoes, rice, quinoa, whatever. I make, for Rosh Hashanah, I make what we call here crispy potatoes, which is very thinly sliced potatoes, then very finely chopped onions, one layer of potatoes, one layer of onions, one layer of potatoes, and then olive oil, put on the top, just like this, and stock, and some stock, and it goes in the oven, and it's very popular.
And bake those again in the oven.
Yeah, there's the crispy bit at the top, and there's the soft bit at the bottom. And there's always the argument, I like crispy, I like soft, so everybody has whatever it is they want.
Everyone is happy for that. Excellent. Yeah. Good.
I mean, this is going to be the funniest Rosh Hashanah because that is strangers, let's put it this way. One lot comes on Friday evening, one on Saturday lunchtime, and the next lot on Sunday lunchtime, because you can't have everybody together.
No, that's what's happened this year, that's right. Sorry, Gloria, I can't hear you.
Is Mickey cooking all 3 meals herself?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It's called prepare and freeze.
Prepare and freeze and shop.
Shop you have to do beforehand because nowadays you don't go into shop so much. It's the once a week click and collect, So it's all advanced planning.
Yeah. Thank you. Ros, were you going to ask another question there? You need to unmute if you are. No? No. Okay. Thank you, Mickey, and thank you, Nolene. We're going to go back to Gloria to see the finished results, I think.
Right. So, can you see the dish? Right. So the chips and the chips have been steaming in the dish. So that's what they mean by wet. And so these are now what were fried chips. And now, so everything comes out. So the chips and the potato, the chips and the chicken come out, and they've been cooked in fresh tomato. And interestingly, Nolene's Kirkle, we do something similar called non-taki, which is a savoury version of what Nolene just cooked, and we serve it with that. And if you want to be a complete heathen, you can have tomato ketchup. Because my children and my nephews, they love having it with tomato ketchup. And so you'll see, so this is the sauce, and then it just goes over the dish. That's it. Can you see it?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's it. And so that comes out in about every Yom Kippur, comes out in about 3 or 4 platters. And a little bit is left over, but not a lot. So even though we've eaten ourselves stupid, we can still carry on eating. So that's in Bahrain called quararang, which is chicken and wet chips.
Fantastic, thank you, Gloria. And again, if you were having that just sort of on its own, if we weren't doing the Miriam's table as such, what would you serve that with? Would you?
It's very difficult because you don't actually serve it with anything really, because green beans, probably a green salad with a very with a sort of lemon oil dressing, nothing heavy, because it's very filling, it's very rich, even though it's only got 3 ingredients. But so it's just with just a really nice crispy green salad. I probably make it maybe once or twice for the rest of the year because it's incredibly fattening with a lot of oil. But if Ben behaves well, my son, I'll make it for him because it's his favourite dish.
Oh, fantastic.
Nolan, take note.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
He'll have to come home for that, but yeah, he'll get sushi. I think calories go out the window somewhat at Yom Tovs anyway. So, you know, everything that you can't say, oh, it's fattening or whatever, you just have to put it on the table.
I think for all of us, it's just about sharing, isn't it? It's about sharing, celebrating, being together, enjoying what we have, enjoying food.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, all 3 things are very sharing pieces, if I may say so, because yours is your big platter of chicken, you just sort of put it in the middle of the table. Yours is your kichels, Nolene, that you just put on the table and people dive into them and then can put their different spread on it. And Mickey as well, you've got a whole chicken there, which I can just see sort of the whole family just sort of coming on and cutting up and really sharing. So they're 3 very lovely things for family dinners. So wonderful. So one of the things I was going to also ask people, if anyone wants to say, is do they have a specific recipe or a memory of their own Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur breaking the fast meal, a specific dish? I know something that I have, but I wondered if anybody else wanted to just talk a little bit about what they remember from the past or what they do at this moment. Unfortunately, maybe not this year, but in previous years. Anybody want to share something? No.
We always had fish.
Julie, you have fish?
Household.
Okay, I'll come to you in a minute.
We always had fried fish, and my mum would never do it herself. So she'd always get in the fried fish and then she'd make like 500 salads to go with it. So like I would never eat fish when I was a child, and she'd always try and like force it down me. And I'd just like eat all these different like salads that she made, because we'd have like the entire Kingston clan would descend on her house. So there could be anywhere between like 10 and 30 people at one time. And so the one thing she wouldn't do is make the fish. But the other thing is my mum's honey cake is really distinctive. It's like really heavy and thick, and it's like very, very moist. She bakes it with oil in it, and like in our household, you have to look for like the darkest piece of honey cake because that's like the stickiest bit. And our family loves it, but everyone else I've met thinks our honey cake is the weirdest honey cake. And it also has no honey in it. It only has golden syrup in it. So that's our Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, there are definitely 2 camps of honey cake. One that's done with golden syrup and one that's done with honey. I've noticed that. My mother's was always done with honey. Julia, and then I'll come to you, John. Julia?
I just thought I'd share that whilst we have the food that we now eat every single Yom Tov, whether it's also the Seder, but also on on breaking of the fast, my mother Sandra and Marilyn talk about Auntie Wolf. Now they always used to go to Auntie Wolf in the East End, and I never knew Auntie Wolf. It was their great aunt, but it's just such a to me, I can just imagine this tiny, she apparently used to rustle up the most enormous feast from this tiny little kitchen in the East End. And it feels to me very much part of my heritage that we have to remember Auntie Wolfer's kitchen on the Yom Tovim, whichever ones they are.
Lovely. It's a nice memory, I'm sure, to have. And that, as you say, that imagery that conjured up that cooking and sort of slaving away over the hot stove, but as you say, from a small little place, but creating these amazing meals for lots of people. Fabulous. Thank you, Chef, for sharing that. John.
So, whoops, we got feedback. Nadine, put yourself. I'd never eaten a honey cake until I came to this country, because we never had honey cake. We had teiglach, and next to the kichel would be another plate piled high with teiglach, which you would be, well, as kids, we ate it all the way through, more at the end. I would probably leave it to my mother to describe. I would describe it as a boiled in syrup bagel with a bit of ginger and some, no cinnamon, ginger in, and then it was dried and cooled and toffee-like. And obviously you would have that also at Pesach, but made from matzah meal. And at every yontif, both the kichel and the teiglach would be on. And so for me, having honey cake was a strange experience, because I miss my teiglach, but my wife says it's too much of a pachka to make. Also, you can.
Thank you for that. I have seen teiglach in shops, and one year I did attempt to make it, and I put it in this jar, I have to admit, and it was so rock hard that I ended up not only throwing the teiglach away, but also the jar. So I'm not quite sure what I did, but that was my attempt at teiglach, and that was it, unfortunately.
Yeah. They're not that. I can't find a nice picture, but nicely made, they're lovely. Not nicely made, they're terrible.
Shame that I did it terribly. I'm not a baker. Ros, are you wanting to speak? Unmute.
And then I just want to ask Gloria a question.
I'll come back to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. We've always had, for breaking the fast, we have to come home and have our cup of tea and challah and lots of butter, and then eventually we sit down, or we have done in the past, to fried fish, cold fried fish, which I've been making for I don't know how long, but in the last few years my younger nieces have now taken over and said we should just have different kinds of chopped liver or chopped herring, and all the easy things that you can put together. And I must say I find that much more relaxing, although I do still make some fried fish so that my son can go home with some at the end, and it seems to go down quite well, and doing it like that, because really, do we need all that food anymore? But I'm amazed at I'm now much older than my mother ever was, so it's that now that those are my old recollections.
Thank you, Ros. Nolene, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to ask Gloria a question, actually. Gloria, in the Bukhari tradition, do you serve those dishes with the rice instead of the chips as a basis for a meal? Or is the chips a particular tradition? Because I know the Persian tradition is to have the rice and the chicken.
Yeah, no, this is about the only dish, interestingly, with potato. Everything else, you're absolutely right, is rice based, and the dishes are influenced by Persian cooking and Afghani cooking. So Afghani, Persian, not Iraqi. Iraqi is very different, but Persian, Afghani, and Bukharian cooking are very similar, and they're all, again, one pot rice dishes. And I think
to make the rice, please, because everybody I speak to has got a different way of how they do the rice.
I'll teach you to make the rice. It's really easy, but yeah, rice is a staple. And I remember as a child, my mother used to get, like big kilo bags of rice, and she'd lay the rice out on the table, and we'd have to clean it, you know, to find all the black bits. And it would take ages, because cooking for her was her raison d'etre. It was who she was. And so everything, you know, she would go to Billingsgate Fish Market on a Thursday morning at 5:30 in the morning, and come back with crates of fish, which, you know, she would sort of chop and clean and then give to neighbours and family and people like that. I can't touch fish because of that now. It actually makes me feel sick. So yes, to answer your question, rice is a basic staple diet.
Thank you.
Can I just say, just to answer Rosie's point about,
oh yeah, go on.
We don't need to eat so much. You're absolutely right. We don't need to eat so much. But this is all about, for me, this is all about tradition. And I hope that my daughter and my son, I'd like my son, you know, I hope that, you know, when I'm too old and I can't do this, that they continue in the same way. I feel very connected to that. So for me, this is about tradition. And if we have leftovers, we share them with neighbours. I think I've even shared them with Mickey's daughter, Ilana. I think Ilana's had food from us. Because, you know, I think that's just what you do now. But I've got to keep making lots and lots.
Thank you, Gloria. I think the pattern of breaking the fast has changed though. I think, you know, there was a lot more of sitting down to 3-course dinners, you know, when you came home, and then people suddenly sort of thought, well, actually 3 courses is just a bit too much. So that got down to 2 courses, and then it was eventually 1 course, and then it was just soup or whatever. And then a lot of people I know just come home and break it on whiskey and honey cake, and that sort of seems to be that's it. That sort of thing. I don't think I could do that personally, but I usually break my fast on a nice bowl of chicken soup. That's the nice way to do it. Ros, did you want to say something else?
I've been at A-List.
Sorry, Hannah, go on.
Since I've been at A-List, our Rosh Hashanah, our Yom Kippur breakfast tradition has been, my mum will pack us up a little Tupperware of honey cake that lives in our car, and then on the way to the car, my husband knocks on Rabbi Josh's door. Josh pours me a little travel cup of whiskey, and then my husband drives me home whilst I sip on some whiskey and eat some honey cake.
Fantastic. That's like the equivalent of the pub crawl almost, you know, the equivalent of the Yom Kippur fast crawl. Excellent. Ros, did you want to say something else?
Well, I just wanted to say one thing we always have is soup. We tried to stop it one year because everybody said, no, we don't really need it. So I made soup. If my son doesn't have his soup, it's not worth eating, you know. So amazingly, quite a few people decided, yes, they would like soup after all. So the soup has to be made as well.
Fantastic. Lovely, thank you.
Hello, I just wanted to say to Gloria that I'm sure Ilana appreciates your contribution to her kitchen. To her dining table, I mean. I
also appreciate her contributions. She always makes me honey cake every year. Or in fact, your granddaughter makes me honey cake now.
Oh, she does.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust that one very much.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. It's lovely.
There's a few fingers in it, yes.
I have to say, I get the sense that I've been invited to the family Rosh Hashanah dinner tonight. You know, we're all family here. It's fantastic. Yeah. And I'm the guest at the family table. So thank you. Thank you for the invitation. As I say, I've been getting hungrier and hungrier throughout this session, throughout this hour. Anybody else got anything to share about, Rosh Hashanah dinners or end of fast dinners? No.
No, I just want to go and eat my food now.
Go.
Funny enough, Gloria, we all want to come and eat your food now.
Yours. You've made dinner, that's for sure.
We made dinner finally. Well,
I'd actually love to start with a kichel and some chopped liver, and then I'd like to go to Gloria's chicken, and then I'm going to go for Mickey's chicken with her apple. Tell me something, Mickey. The apple in the middle of the chicken, it just goes very soft, I presume, and very mulchy.
Not very soft. It's like, because eating apples don't become mush, do they?
No,
right.
It still has a bit shape.
better
And
shape.
yes, it's yeah, it has more, but it's not, if you put flour or whatever it is people put in stuffing, bread,
Yeah,
it's too heavy. Like this, it's a light, you know,
right.
for light food, not heavy food, not
Not a heavy stuffing, not like a bready one. It just seems to
it's
be
also
like
because it's Rosh Hashanah, isn't it? So we put apples in it
absolutely
and spice and herbs to spice up.
lovely, really lovely. Thank you. Anybody else want to say anything, contribute? No.
Just to wish you a
Well,
good Yom for happy.
Well, then let me just pass to Hannah to conclude our hour of cooking.
All I want to say is thank you, especially to our 3 cooks. Thanks to Gloria and Nolene and Mickey. It's been really interesting, and I'm excited to try and make some of these recipes because, you know, with a rule of 6 means that it's getting harder and harder to eat with people. So more time for us to cook and try new things. And so thank you for inspiring hopefully one of my dinners in the near future. We're really grateful for you sharing your recipes and inviting us into your kitchens and your dinner tables, but we also don't want to keep you from eating for too long. I also want to thank Lynette massively for this, because without Lynette this evening wouldn't have happened. She has put in all the legwork here, and I've just got to come along for the glory ride, which is lovely.
I don't think that's quite right, but thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Shana, we hope that you eat good food and do some of the shul stuff too.
Yeah.
Shana Tova, everyone.
Shana Tova, everyone. Happy New Year, a good one. And eat well, be well, and be safe. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Mom.